Hey everyone, it's Mrs. Thomas. I'm here to do a short little mini lesson about the elements of poetry. So after we've read Water Rolls, Water Rises, you saw a lot of different information. Okay, and we actually were applying all of these elements of poetry with all of the questions that I brought up in the presentation. So the first thing is the message. And this is what the author is trying to tell us about a thing or a place. So we know that the topic in Water Rolls, Water Rises was about water, right? Then we learned about a stanza. Now, a stanza is a group of lines, and I always compare this to sentences. So rather than full sentences that form a paragraph, poets use what are called stanzas. So they're groups of lines that flow together and have rhythm. Sound patterns. Alliteration. This is something like Big Brown Bear. So it's where the author repeats the same sound over and over again in one stanza. Then we have rhyme. This is what Dr. Seuss is known for. So hop, stop, drop, hop on pop, cat in the hat. Then we have rhythm. So rhythm is 1, 2, buckle my shoe. Or if you think of any song that you've heard on the radio, they all have rhythm. Okay. And then that big word, onomatopoeia. So we've talked a lot about this. So you guys do an awesome job with saying it and with talking about examples of it. So we talked about things like crash, bang, boom. And then sensory words. And these are those words that apply to your senses. So your sight, your sound, your smell, your touch, and taste. So this is why I asked all of those different questions and talked to you about creating mental images and visualizing and creating a movie in your mind, because this is what poets really try to do. So sensory words are a huge part of poetry. So down here is just a little example, and it tells us here there was a little guinea pig. So we know the author's message, the poet's message, is going to be to tell us about this guinea pig. Then we have a stanza. So here is a stanza. So it's little groups of sentences, lines of text. There was a little guinea pig who, being little, was not big. Tiny feet, chubby cheeks, curly hair, and tiny squeaks. So we've been talking a lot about complete and incomplete sentences, and we do not have subjects and predicates. So you can think of poets as kind of like the rule breakers. So this thought all goes together. All of these describing words go together, all of these sensory words, and there's a pattern to it. However, this is not what we think of when we think of complete sentences. Then we have a sensory word here, so squeaks. Can you all hear a little guinea pig squeaking? And then a sound pattern. This tiny fellow's appetite was always big, day and night. So as you can see, appetite, night. Those have the same ending sound. So poets use these elements to make their writing more interesting and to really apply to all of your senses. So now we're going to work on our On My Own passage, and you can find this in your My Book. It's on page 210, 210, and we are going to be talking about something called an acrostic poem, and you guys are going to write your own poem after we do this. You will have all week to work on this. So do I expect you to do your very, 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 very best? Absolutely. So you'll be working on this Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So as we look at this, I want you to pay attention to where it says prepare to read. Okay, so this says poetry. And remember, that's that word genre that we learned about. And poetry is a genre, just like we talked about fantasy, informational text. Well, poetry is its own genre. So it uses images, sounds, and rhythm to express feelings. So when we read this, we can quickly look at it and see that it's different from a lot of what we've read so far. We don't see big, long paragraphs. So we can look at this and think, what is it showing in the picture? What is it showing in the title? And we know a lot about matter now. What is this poem trying to tell me? Okay. So you are going to think about that. And then where it says preview matter matters, you're going to make a prediction. And your prediction is going to be about what feelings might these two poems express? What might they be about? And so you'll be reading a poem about solids And then if you look on page 212, there's a second poem, and that's about liquids. So go ahead and take a moment to write about what your prediction is. And you're going to be writing this on page 210. All right, so now that you've written your prediction on page 210 in your My Book, it is time for us to go ahead and read about matter. So matter matters. So we're going to use the words from this poem, and I want you to really focus on those mental images. Think about what the author is describing. Look at the way that the text is written, any special type, any rhyming patterns, any sensory words. Listen for the rhythm of the poem. Okay, so I want all of that to stay in the back of your mind as we're reading about this. So here we can see that this little girl, she's outside. Oh, she's holding a rock here. A rock is a type of solid. I wonder how many of you thought that she might be talking about solids or different types of matter in her poetry. So down here it says read. In each line of the poem, look for words that begin with the same letter. Underline these words, those words. So this is what we talked about earlier, and this is alliteration. So I'm going to do it on the screen, but I want you to annotate or mark up the words in your book. Okay, so we're on page 211. Okay, so another thing on this page that I want you to do, and this is because good readers always ask and answer questions before, during, and after reading. So if while Mrs. Thomas is reading this, you have any questions about any parts of it, put a little question mark beside it, and then we can see if your questions are answered by the end of it. So I am going to read the poem and mark it up. As I'm doing that, I want you doing the same thing in your book, okay? Some can be big, bumpy, or boxy. Others can be small, sparkly, or squishy. Let me give you a hint. It is the kind of matter that does not change its shape. So, this is not like a normal paragraph we're used to seeing. It does have rhythm. It has alliteration. And so that's what we're going to go ahead and underline now. So I'm going to highlight it. Actually, I can underline it in mine. So I want you to underline the words in yours. So I see big, bumpy, boxy. So we all see that those words all start with the letter B. So the author is repeating the same beginning sound over and over and over. So some can be big, bumpy, or boxy. Others can be small, sparkly, or squishy. So we hear s, s, s. So go ahead and underline those in your book. So again, this is alliteration. And I'm just going to put a little note beside it. So let me give you a hint. It is the kind of matter that does not change its shape. Okay, so what we just talked about here was alliteration. Now, one thing I really want to draw your attention to is, what do you notice about some of the letters on this page? So I want you to go ahead and take a look and kind of observe and see what you notice. It might be visually different, what text features this poet might have used. Okay, so we can see that the text is flowing, right? We can see that the first letter, and I'm going to highlight these so you can see it and it really stands out. You can see that the first letter of each stanza, of each little line of poetry here, spells out, are you seeing it yet? The word, ta-ta, solids. So why did the poet make the first letter of each line bold? And remember, we talked about bold print is where the print is much darker than the rest of the print on the page. So if you look at this, you can see visually that these beginning letters, the first letter of each line of text, is bold. The rest of it is normal font. So why do you think that the author did this? So I want you to go ahead in yours and you're going to write what you think. So why did the poet make the first letter of each line bold? So go ahead and complete that in your book on page 211. All right, so now that we read our poem about solids, we're going to read our next poem. And are we seeing any pattern here? Are we learning different things about matter? And we learned that the three types of matter are solid, liquid, and gas. And based on what we just learned in our last poem with text features and bold print, are you noticing anything on this page right away? Does anything jump out of you? So if you look here, we're seeing that same pattern that we saw earlier, where the first letter in every line of text is bold. So I'm going to highlight that just to draw your eye to it even more. Because this is really what the author is trying to do, is trying to draw your eye to those letters. Because we can see, what word do we spell? Liquid. So we're going to read this together. As I am reading this, I want you really, really listening for those sensing words, okay? So these are appeal to your senses, like your sight, your hearing, your touch, your taste, and your smell. And of course, we're not really seeing and hearing and smelling these things. So what you have to do is you have to imagine it. You have to visualize it. So I really want you using the words that the author used here to create pictures in your mind to help you better understand what they're trying to explain and describe. Okay? So as I'm reading, I want you thinking, which of the poet's words help me to create a picture in my mind? And then I want you to underline those words. Okay? I want you to underline those words. So which of these words helps to create that visual? So as I'm reading it, I want you to underline those words that really jump out at you. Liquids are everywhere, in splashing seas and tiny teacups. Quiet streams slowly slide, unless they freeze and turn to ice. Don't slip. So I want you to go ahead and, like I said, I'm not going to do it, but I want you to underline any of those words that really jumped out at you and appeal to your different senses. So go ahead and take a minute to do that. And of course, you can click pause on the video. So now it wants us to check our understanding. What do you learn about matter from this poem? Use your own words to describe the poet's ideas. So sometimes poets say things differently than if we were just reading a regular informational text. So if we were reading about liquids, I don't recall seeing anything that looked quite like this in any of our informational texts that we read. So poets use a special way of writing. Okay, they have different patterns. Like we said, the flow of their writing is different. In this case, it's an acrostic poem, and it spells out the word liquid. So we can tell by looking at this that this is about liquids. So what I want you to do down here is I want you to, in mine it says typing, but you're going to write it in your book. So you're on page 212. I want you to write based on this poem, not based on everything else we've learned in our matter unit, because we've learned a lot. But within this poem, I want you to write words to describe the poet's ideas. What did you learn about matter? Okay, now it's your turn to be a poet. So on page 213 in your book, we are looking at where it says write about it. And in this part, you're going to write a poem like the poems in Matter Matters. First, choose a state of matter. So you can choose a solid, a liquid, or a gas. And you're going to write that vertically. And remember, vertically is up and down, top to bottom, vertical. So you are going to write either solid, liquid, or gas in capital letters down the side of your paper. So you're doing this in your book on page 213, okay? Then beside that, you're going to write a phrase, or what you would think of in a paragraph as a sentence that begins with the letter on each line. So we're going to do a very quick little acrostic poem together. And again, we're going to see if through my acrostic poem, if I have given you any information about this topic. So I'm not going to write about matter. I'm not choosing a solid, liquid, or a gas. I'm just going to choose the topic of, let's see, so I spelled the word dog. So let's see how we can tell somebody about dogs. Dig in the dirt in my yard. Only wants to make me happy. Gives the best doggy kisses. So looking at this, does this tell me about dogs? Dig in the dirt in my yard. Only wants to make me happy. Gives the best doggy kisses. So all of these things have to do with the topic, and my topic is about dogs. And so I have 2 dogs. So really, I'm writing about either one of those. But if you have a dog, think about it. Is this the same way that you would describe them? If you were just reading this, would you be able to catch on that it was talking about a dog? And then if you looked back at the pattern, you would see that the first letter in each phrase spells out the word dog. So you are going to do the same thing, again, choosing either a solid, a liquid, or a gas. Write facts and information that would explain to the reader something about those topics, and they all have to do with matter. So again, do not just copy what the author did in the book for Matter Matters. I want to see what you know about this topic, and I want to see what you can do as a poet. Do an awesome job, and when you're done, make sure you take a picture of your work on page 213 and attach it to the assignment. Do your best.